Welcome back to the Beer Junkies. Today we are going to be brewing a brown ale. Both the American brown ale and British brown ale have a malty sweet base with notes of caramel, nuttiness, toastiness, and a little bit of chocolate character. The difference between the two is going to come down to the types of hops that we use for both. The American styles have more pronounced hoppiness, with the New World hops that are typically used, add a little bit more citrus character. The English styles don't have that hop character to the same degree. It's a lot more reserved with more malt shining through. You can have a little bit of a floral character from the British hops like East Kent Golding, but that's optional and not always there. If you stick around, we're going to walk you through the ingredients we use for both, the malts we use, the hops we use, the yeast strain that we use, and the water profile. We will also walk you through our process, the mashing, mash out, sparging, the boil, whirlpool, knockout, fermentation at the very end. We'll walk you through the taste testing. So stick with us and enjoy. The water profile for the brown ale is 50 parts per million of calcium, 27 parts per million of sodium, 50 parts per million of sulfate, and 60 parts per million of chloride. A little bit higher levels of sodium will help round out that flavor, and then the higher chloride level will help build out that fullness and that sweetness. You may want to consider adding some bicarbonate as a pH adjuster. Those dark roasted grains that we're going to get to in a minute will drop the pH a little bit too much to the point where it will be acidic if you do not add a little bit of a pH adjuster. So you can do that by adding either pickling lime or baking soda, totally up to you. But I am using calcium chloride, gypsum, Epsom salt, and a little bit of baking soda to get that water profile. I'm filling up the hot liquor tank right now to the volume and temperature that I need. Once that's ready, I'll push it into the mash tun to mash in. But before that, let's go over the malts that we're going to be using today. Alright, I have all my malts over here. They are ready to go for mash in. I've got the rice hulls on top and then the crunched grist below. For the base malt of the brown ale, I always use Maris Otter. It just adds more of a rich maltiness, a little bit more nuttiness and toastiness than the two-row does. If you don't have access to Maris Otter, I would recommend adding 10 to 15% biscuit malt to the two-row. That will add a little bit more character that you don't necessarily get with the two-row. For the specialties, you have a couple of choices. You can add about 5 to 8% of Cara Munich. This will add a rich maltiness and a little bit of biscuit flavor along with a nice copper color. You can also add British Crystal around 65 Levabon at 5 to 8% also. This will add caramel, toffee, and a little bit of sweetness. You can add Victory Malt at about 5 to 10%, and this will give a nice nutty and toasty flavor. And finally, for my color adjustment, I like to use an English chocolate malt, like from Thomas Fawcett or from Simpson's, at less than 5%. This will be mostly a color adjustment, but it will add a little bit of coffee and chocolate flavors, so use with caution. But the mash tun is ready to go, so let's mash in. This is our mashing setup. We are pulling the wort from the bottom of the mash tun through the false bottom. It is pushing through our wort pump into the lower part of the Herms coil, coming out of the upper part of the Herms coil. This will keep our wort heated. It is continuously recirculating, so it will build up that grain bed filter to clarify our wort. Your mashing profile will depend on the type of yeast strain that you use. If you're using a higher attenuating strain like we do for our light beers, such as the California Ale yeast from White Labs, you may want to consider mashing at 156 degrees for 40 minutes. At 156 degrees, the alpha amylase is slightly more active and will create more dextrins, which will build that fullness that you want in this style. If you're using a lower attenuating strain like we do for our brown ales, like the English ale yeast from White Labs, you want to consider mashing at 152 degrees for about 60 minutes. That alpha amylase and beta amylase mix will produce more fermentable sugars to get you to that final gravity. If you mash at 156 degrees and use a lower attenuating strain, your final gravity will be too high and it will be way too sweet and cloying, and it's just an unpleasant overall beer. We just finished mashing, so now we are mashing out. We are raising the temperature up to about 168 degrees Fahrenheit to reduce the viscosity and turn off those enzymes. So we are pulling the wort from the bottom of the mash tun, pushing it through our wort pump just like before, but now the hot liquor tank is set at about 175 degrees to raise that wort temperature. It is continuously recirculating, so it will continue to build that filter to help us as we sparge. We have finished mashing out, so now we are sparging. We are pulling the wort from the bottom of the mash tun, pushing it through our wort pump, but this time we switched the lever over to the hose connecting to the boil kettle. So now it is going all the way down here and filling up through the racking arm. At the same time, we are pulling off our sparge water from the hot liquor tank, pushing it through our water pump, and then recirculating through the same port the mash just was to rinse all the residual sugars that were left in those grains. The hops are where you get to start really distinguishing between the American brown ale and the English brown ale. Starting with the English, you're going to want about any clean bittering hop. I like to use Mount Hood at the 60-minute mark to add about 16 IBUs worth. At the 15-minute mark, you're going to want to use an English hop. I like to use East Kent Goldings, and I add about 6 IBUs worth at the 15-minute mark. For the American brown ale, you're going to want another clean bittering hop at the 60-minute mark to add about 18 IBUs worth of bittering. You're also going to want to use an American hop such as Cascade at the 15-minute mark to add about 6 IBUs, and then about 2 IBUs worth at the 3-minute mark. You can dry hop with the Cascade hop or with the American hop you choose, but that's totally up to you. We just got up to a boil. We will boil this wort for 90 minutes and add the hops in as we need. At 10 minutes, we will add a yeast nutrient, and at 5 minutes, we will add Rolflock tablets as a fining agent. Once the boil is complete, we will whirlpool. We just finished the boil, so now we are whirlpooling. We are pulling the wort from the bottom of the boil kettle, pushing it through our pump into the tangential input. This will create a vortex in the boil kettle to pull all of that sedimentation to the bottom to help clarify the wort before we push it over into the fermenter. We just finished the boil, so now we are going to start knockout. So we are going to pull from the bottom of the boil kettle. I'm going to start this pump as it pushes through. It's going to push out all the sanitizer in the heat exchanger through the hoses. So I can speed this up a little bit. All right, I will turn on the glycol cooling system and our water. All right, make sure we're connected down here. We are. All right, so I will wait for the wort to start passing through that sight glass, which should be soon. All right, there it goes. I will check the temperature periodically over here. The oxygen will be injected right through there, but we are going to follow it all the way down here. Once the wort begins to flow out of this discharge hose, we will open the fermenter to allow that to capture it instead. Should be coming up any second. All right, here we go. And once all of that sanitizer is out of the hose, we will switch it over and then run it until we have our desired volume. This is the yeast that we use. It is the English ale yeast from White Labs, but you can use any yeast strain that emphasizes a full character with a nice malty sweetness. We ferment the brown ale at 67 degrees for a little over a week until we get about 4 to 6 gravity points within our final gravity. We will then raise it up to 72 degrees for that diacetyl rest to let the yeast clean up after themselves. We will then cold crash it to 33 degrees for about a day, transfer it to our bright tank, carbonate it to 2 volumes of CO2, keg it, and then enjoy. All right, this is what we made. I chose to do an English brown ale, so it won't have that hop character that the American brown ale will have. But for the smell, I get the rich malty sweetness, a little bit of caramel and some toffee. For the taste, there's a balancing bitterness, but strong notes of rich maltiness, a little bit of sweetness, and some toffee tucked in there. The color is, I prefer it to be very dark brown. You don't have to go this brown. You can adjust that by the chocolate additions. But we're over the age of 21. We do not condone underage drinking. Please drink responsibly. Cheers. If you'd like to see more brewing content like this, make sure you click that subscribe button right below and let me know what you'd like to see next in the comments. Cheers.